Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, a Pittsburgh Steelers podcast made by fans like you, for fans like you. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. I'm your host, Joe Kuzma, and I'm chuckling because, well, I have a guest, a co-host, a cohort with me again today. He's becoming quite the regular, and the reason I'm laughing is because we just can't help but laugh off the air, and it just is, this joy just continues onto the broadcast. It is Brian B to the E Roach. Hey, what's going on today, Brian?
How are you today, Joseph?
Oh, geez. Oh, now you're going to be intentionally not be silly. So we start to record this show, and I was talking about Amazon Prime, and I was talking about it off the air, too, because I was just waiting for some equipment to come in. I'm going to try and upgrade this shindig a little bit, make it even a little fancier if I could. And, you know, when you buy something with free 2-day shipping and it doesn't even leave the Amazon warehouse for 3 days, you know, that puts a little, not so much pep in my step, I would say. I'm a little disappointed in that. I don't know. I should complain to somebody, but I don't think anyone's going to listen.
Probably not.
No. But you know what, Brian, since the last time you were here, you know, that could almost be, I was talking about this, and I'm saying I want to do another Joe's Pet Peeve podcast, and I'm going to stay true to myself. I'm going to try and do these every so often. We finally got Terry on for a WTF after so long, and you know, you're just hogging all the time over there, Brian. But you know what? Aside from the free 2-day shipping not being 2 days, that could be a pet peeve all its own, but it has nothing to do with football. We have some actual football news that happened, and it actually involves the Pittsburgh Steelers. Can you believe that? Since the last time you and I have talked, there's been some free agency moves, and the market opened about a week ago. So, you know, it wasn't the biggest moves, and you may have missed it. And I know you were joking around with me, and that's what made me snortle and shut this off and start over. But we were talking about the very first name that the Steelers signed in this free agency period. And, you know, I get some people on Twitter. Now, some people, I don't know if they're just being sarcastic, if they're intentionally trolls, if they live their lives full of misery, which, you know what, they really shouldn't, because it's like we don't live in Cleveland. I just told someone on Twitter
exactly.
that. So everyone's complaining. They're saying how, the Patriots are doing this and that, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm not going to talk about that just yet. But the first name they signed was David Johnson. And there were two things that I took from this. It was one, that somebody may actually confuse this for the David Johnson, the really good one that's a running back for the Arizona Cardinals, which it wasn't him. So,
no.
And then the other thing that happened was somebody realized it really is the David Johnson that played for the Steelers last year. And they said, that's it. That's the piece. That's the key to beating the New England Patriots. And you know what? I agreed with them so much. I wrote an entire article about David Johnson and how it wasn't that bad of a signing, really.
No, it's not at all. David Johnson has been a good complementary piece, and there's no reason to think he won't continue to be a good complementary piece. He adds some depth at the tight end position. He gives them some options. He's a decent blocker. He's a decent receiver. It's a Steelers-like move.
Yeah, what do you want to say? Batten down the hatches. And I wrote about this, and I said that he played about 25% of the snaps on offense last year, which is actually quite incredible, because there wasn't even 10. I don't even think there were 10 players. Now, you have 11 on the field, of course. Right. I don't even think there were 10 guys that played 50 or more. I think Eli Rogers was right at 50, and some of that was the wide receiver mess that we're going to talk about in a little bit here, because you had Darius Hayward-Bay get hurt. You had Sammy Coates get hurt. They called up DeMarcus Ayers and Kobe Hamilton from the practice squad. They were just Marcus Wheaton was, oh, dear, Brian. I got to sidetrack here for a second. So here's a free agency move. We may as well talk about Marcus Wheaton here in a second. But David Johnson, anyways, can play fullback. He could play tight end. He's in the jumbo packages. The guy caught a ball for a 2-point conversion against the Browns, probably like the 5th option during that play. You know, he's consistent and solid enough that he's versatile. He definitely has to be a guy who knows that playbook in and out, because they put him like a chess piece all over the field. And you know what? You need guys like that. When Ladarius Green gets hurt and goes down, and Roosevelt Nix wasn't there for at least the first month and a half, guess who was in that spot? David Johnson. So
David Johnson.
Totally cool with this signing. So I would be remiss to not mention that Marcus Wheaton signed a sweetheart of a deal. It was at 2 years with the Chicago Bears, and it was something like he's guaranteed $5 million in the first year or $6 million in the first year. I think $6 million overall, $5 million in the first year. So Marcus got paid. Good for Marcus. We're going to miss Mr. T Wheat, whatever it is, a bunch of numbers or something on his Twitter handle. I just know because he's been a good friend of Steel City Underground. So I always like the guys that interact with the fans and take some time out of their day when they don't have to. They certainly don't have to. And you know what? This is good. Hopefully he's set for life. It's sad to see him go, but it is what it is. There's just too many guys on that wide receiver depth chart. And but I was saying this because Marcus Wheaton comes to mind. Earlier I was watching the game film, and I'm working on the piece that's going to go out over the weekend. It's the recall from week 3 of last season, and you happen to remember who we played and how that turned out, Brian. It was the Philadelphia Eagles, and not a pretty game.
It was no, I don't think about that too often.
The only memory I have of it is I missed the only good drive that the Steelers opened with, because over here in Northeast Ohio, the regional game was the Cleveland Browns. This Eagles game, I think, came on like it was a 4:25 or 4:15 or something like that over on CBS. Because it was Phil Simms and Jim Nantz were the broadcast team. So I'm waiting for this game to come on, and I think the Browns were playing like the Dolphins or something. It was one of these games that went overtime. And I was so angry. I like punched a wall because I had to watch the crappy Browns cut into my Steelers game. They don't cut over. They stuck with the Cleveland game. And, but you get lucky a little bit being based over in where I'm at. The Browns were so bad that when they played the game up in Buffalo, like in December, I want to say it was like maybe one of the last 3 or 4 games left for the season, they actually took the Browns off TV. They gave them like the lowest of the – we were nearly the broadcast team for that game. Like nobody wanted to go there. So it's like getting Doug Flutie to announce on Christmas. So the Steelers and Ravens. So just a little sidebar there. Marcus Wheaton it's pretty bad. We both dislike, I want to say, is a fair term for Phil Simms and his biased commentary against the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, that's a good term. Phil's not my bud.
But he has one for the ages. So Marcus Wheaton drops a sure touchdown like in the first quarter. I think it was the first drive maybe, or a second drive. Ben puts this ball like on the money 20-30 yards down the field, and you just on the numbers, and drops it. And then there was another one he throws towards the sideline and skips right off. His hands are like right there, like almost like the W to catch the ball with your, put your thumbs together.
Yep. I remember
it. Drops it. And then there was like another one where he was just not on the page. He had like 3 or 4 like miscues. And it's like 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And Marcus Wheaton gets one. It's like a short little dump off route. And Phil Simms, right in the middle of this play, live TV, he's like, hey, you finally got one. So I feel bad because Marcus was hurt and it took him a while. He didn't really have a training camp, and in all fairness, that was a really rough game for a lot of Pittsburgh Steelers. So but you know what? That unfortunately, that's my memory of Marcus Wheaton for today because it's just fresh in my head from watching the game film. So
I mean, Marcus, it's we've talked about this before. If there was no way the Steelers were going to give him large dollars. It would have been a prove-it contract if they signed him, but the market was there, and people, as we saw in free agency, people were snapping up receivers. I mean, come on, Kenny Britt, $70 billion gazillion or whatever the Browns threw at him. The market was there, and he got paid, and there was no way the Steelers were going to give him that money.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. You have Antonio Brown. You're still working with Sammy Coates is under a rookie deal. They just signed it. DHB is going to be in the second of a 3-year deal. Who else do we got? We got some other guys. Kobe Hamilton was re-signed.
Kobe Hamilton, Marcus Ayers. And there's a guy that's not there right now,
but
could be and probably will be that will bolster that receiving core dramatically when he comes back, and that's Martavis.
Yeah, that's gonna really shuffle the deck when it comes to everything. So if you just look at the guys they already had, I think there's 6 guys with that. We did this before. I was counting on fingers and toes trying to figure it out. So, C'est la vie, Marcus Wheaton. So the second best news, and you know what? You've jogged my memory. I'm gonna have to talk about maybe the Browns, Bengals, and Ravens real quick if we have time, or I'm gonna bump it to another show, but. There's been some decent moves, and there's just been some head scratchers with all three. And I know there's some head scratcher. Well, somebody wants to think it's a head scratcher, but we've been telling anybody who listens to this show knows that Landry Jones was coming back.
Absolutely.
So it's another one of those things where the Twitter world was like, why? And blah, 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 blah. So, Brian, now Landry Jones, 2-year deal. Looks like that's really set up that they could draft a guy this year, or they could draft a guy next year, because, you got Mettenberger for 1 more year. So I think they bought themselves some time. It's not like Landry's going anywhere. There was no market for him.
No, there was none. It's an incredibly team-friendly deal. They could part ways after a year if they needed to, and it would cost them next to nothing to do so. But at the same time, he can be here for the next 2. He had no chance to start, which is what he even said. He said if he had a chance to get a chance, just to be in the competition to start, he probably would have taken it. But he wasn't being offered that anywhere. And as a backup, he'd rather be here. Well, who wouldn't? So it's a good deal for the Steelers. I got to the point the day after they signed him to where I started just posting on Facebook posts and Twitter that I couldn't fight that battle anymore. That if people can't see that of all the people out there that were available right now, that Landry Jones is not the best option for the Steelers, then they're just blinded by whatever is in their craw about Landry. Maybe it's the little strange lumberjacky weird puppeteer look he gives in his interviews with his shirt completely done all the way up and his collar tight and his little plaid shirts, and maybe it off-puts some people. I kind of think it's cool because it's different, and he clearly is not looking to impress that way. And it's just nice. And I think, I don't know what it is that sets people off about Landry, but and I've said this before, I'm not necessarily a Landry fan. I think he's good for what he is, which is a backup quarterback.
Rob Rossi said the same thing when we had him on here with Ron Lippock, and he said, are you looking for Big Ben's replacement? Or are you looking for a backup quarterback? Because they're 2 different things, and they most certainly are.
Absolutely.
So, I just had to chuckle because I know that Simon Chester over with the Steelers Wire is always busting my chops, and I actually had to send a tweet his way and let him know that we were talking about Landry Jones right now, because it's like 24/7. If there's like a sniff of Landry Jones in the air, Simon is just pounding on me about him. He does not like him whatsoever, but he told me he would take butt fumble over, if you don't know who butt fumble is, it's Mark Sanchez. Mark Sanchez enters a game. I think he throws 5 passes for the Dallas Cowboys at the end of the year last year. So they sit Dak Prescott. They got everything in the bag as far as the 1 seed in the NFC. They play Tony Romo. Tony Romo's like one of these little porcelain dolls, so they only put him in for like a quarter or 2. They bring Mark Sanchez out there, and it's like, let's see what we got with Mark Sanchez. This could be one of our backup quarterbacks. And the dude throws 5 passes, and 2 of them are completed, to the other team.
The other team.
He throws 2 picks. Butt fumble. He wanted butt fumble. So he challenged me to find Mark Sanchez's best games versus Landry Jones. And there's actually the Landry Jones game against the Cleveland Browns and some of his stats against the Arizona Cardinals were very favorable statistic-wise with butt fumble. The only problem is butt fumble has had a lot more games and a lot more bad games. So there's more volume of a few more good games too, where, every now and then they say a blind squirrel finds a nut. So
well, and remember that when he played for the Jets, you're talking about a strong defense with a good solid running attack. And that's the kind of situation where he didn't have to throw the ball. They focused on the run when Ryan was running the Jets. So it was a different scenario. Landry has performed adequately when he's been in the game, and sometimes even better than adequately. We talked about this. He was a couple minor mistakes away from beating the Patriots. So, he's not a bad quarterback. He's just not Ben's replacement, but he was never meant to be. So I think it's a good move and a very smart move for them to bring him back. I think it was at a better deal than I thought they were going to get out of it. Frankly, I thought that there would at least be some people sniffing around Landry. Apparently not. And I'm fine with that because it means we got a real nice team-friendly deal and we have a backup quarterback in place.
Yeah, there's some of the comments that come out around there. Now, Jay Cutler's still kind of floating around out there, and some people even mentioned like Tony Romo. It's like, who would want Tony? You don't want a quarterback like that. No, he's still looking to
breathe on that guy, and his head will fall off to the side at this point. I mean, his back, strong winds. If he was walking around in New Jersey yesterday when the winds were gusting at 50 miles an hour, he would have broken in half.
Yeah, if anyone's seen, it was the Great and Powerful Oz, like the prequel one that Disney did a few years ago, and they had like the little doll that crushed into a bunch of pieces. That's what I think of when I think of Tony Romo.
There you go.
But yeah, most certainly, and running these numbers, like you said, I had to do it comparative between Jones and Sanchez, and it was tough to find games where Sanchez was throwing more than 20-some passes. He only had like maybe 3 games where he's thrown 30 or more in a game or attempted. So that was crazy. And then you got some out there that are like, what about Colin Kaepernick? And he's still on the unemployment line too. But here's the newest guy on the unemployment line. This was the guy I was really comparing Landry Jones to because Chase Daniel had like maybe played in 4 games. I think he has like 1 start, and he had way worse stats. And he comes in last year and totally stinks up the joint too. So you know what this guy does. Now, let's look at this from a Chase Daniel perspective. Last season, his offensive coordinator from the Kansas City Chiefs, that's who Chase Daniel was with at the time of free agency. So his offensive coordinator, Doug Peterson, goes to Philadelphia, becomes the head coach of the Eagles. So who's there with the Eagles right now? Well, they kicked some guys to the curb, but they still had Sam Bradford. And they're looking, okay, well, did he really think like, well, I'm going to go with my offensive coordinator and I'm going to have a chance to start over Sam Bradford? No. And I don't think that. But he gets paid, it was 3 years, $21 million, and it was like $12 million guaranteed out of that deal, which he chased the money. He got paid a boatload of money, and he's essentially just Landry Jones. So talking about the team-friendly deal, Landry's like around $2 million something, $2.2 million. I don't have the exact figures in front of me. I could pull them up here in a moment. But he costs like a bag of peanuts compared to what some of these other guys want. But Chase Daniel asks for, well, this is what happens in Philadelphia. The Eagles, they mortgage like the farm, the little recreational boat that they had too, and they decided that they're going to ride around bicycles for the next few drafts in terms of their property in order to get Carson Wentz. So they draft this guy. Now you have Bradford, Wentz, and Daniel. So what's Daniel thinking at this point? Well, maybe Wentz will be sitting back there and blah, blah, blah. I don't know what he's thinking, but the Eagles smartly, Teddy Bridgewater gets hurt with the Vikings, and so they reach out to Philadelphia, and the Eagles smartly send Sam Bradford over to the Vikings, and now it's Carson Wentz and Chase Daniel, and Carson Wentz becomes a starter. So you fast forward to this year, and Chase Daniel asks for his release because he feels he could be a starter somewhere.
I posted this a couple times on Twitter, but drugs are bad, okay?
Yeah, they are. So I think what my point is in saying all this, there are guys like Landry who are people like Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't have a whole lot of starts, and everyone just thinks he's like he walks on water like a god of some sort because he plays for the Patriots. He just happens to be a backup. And somebody at some time is going to pay that guy a ridiculous amount of money to play football somewhere and try to be a starter, and he could totally fall flat on his face. Not to say that he will. My whole point in mentioning the Chase Daniel thing is he has like no starting experience. You have very little tape. It almost looks like the Brock Osweiler thing, speaking of the Cleveland Browns. And I mentioned Sam Bradford, too, because everyone wants draft Ben's replacement. This is the year. The Steelers are picking at pick 30. We're going to be hammering at this point in the next month or so leading up to the draft. And we've hammered it a little bit before, but Sam Bradford was the top pick overall, 2012, maybe 11, somewhere in there. Number one guy overall. How many teams he played for? What has he done? What have you shown for? What have you done lately? He had an okay year, but he's never been a superstar and he's never been healthy. No. So even taking what should be the best quarterback, the top, you could pick anybody, and this is the guy that goes number one overall. Not a guarantee that you're going to have a franchise player.
Absolutely, and it's, as you said, we've hammered this point into the ground, and for some reason it keeps springing back up, so we keep trying to hammer it back in. But you're not guaranteed to find a franchise quarterback, even picking at the top half of the draft. You are much, much less likely to find one at the bottom. And I know Tom Brady, woo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo. I know that they're talking about Dak, but as we said before, talk to me about Dak in 3 more years. Let him play out a couple more years, and then we'll see. 1 year is 1 year. I'm not convinced that he's a franchise quarterback yet. I'm not saying he's not going to be. I'm just saying I'm not convinced. But, for the most part, when you find that guy, you find him in the top half of the first round. You don't find them lingering around in the 4th and 5th rounds. And the Steelers are not going to take a quarterback anytime before the 4th round.
And not any time before they think that they're going to have to shove Ben out the door as well, because Ben could still play beyond his contract. I know he gave us some scare, and we've talked about that too, Brian, but it's just, I don't know. Like you said, this thing keeps popping up, and it just keeps driving me crazy, and it's just the reason I had to bring it up with the insanity. It's almost a WTF. I should kick over to Terry for her piece, because Chase Daniel thinking he's a starter in the league is just, it might as well have Landry Jones, the least intimidating-looking guy since Mike Glennon, it's probably what people hate about him. There's that meme that was going around with them side by side. Who scares you more? Or who intimidates you more? And it's Landry Jones in a flannel shirt with his lumberjack beard.
I'm telling you, that's the guy. He just stuck his neighbor in a wood chipper.
Man, that's cold. Well, I don't know. Aaron Hernandez was just maybe be smart enough to not just dump everything in the back lake, the pond around in his community, like Aaron Hernandez did. So, that's another thing too. It's like everybody talks about, Bill Belichick, this and that. They had an actual murderer on their team. So when somebody does something wrong with Le'Veon Bell hasn't even technically failed a drug test for smoking pot. He got caught with it, and they screwed up, and he didn't blah, blah, blah. And everybody's always driving home about get rid of Tomlin, or why can't they discipline this? Why can't the Steelers do this or that? And it's just like, these guys had a murderer on their team.
Look, drugs are worse than murder. I don't know why. It just drugs is much more. He smokes pot. He smokes weed. That's bad. He's not there for us. He killed people. He's not there for them either, but he's not on our team, so we don't care.
Well, and you know what? It's not like the coaches in front office can, my employer doesn't know what I do in my free time, and they don't have total control over everything. Just because you have a contract and you're employed by a National Football League team, I mean, it doesn't mean you can't go out and just do dumb stuff. So, and it's certainly not the responsibility. It's not like Bill Belichick or Mike Tomlin or any of these guys are somebody's dad or parent or something. You know what I mean? It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I'll give the Aaron Hernandez issue a pass with dumb stuff because that's a little bit worse. But I will certainly go along with the Martavis issues and the Le'Veon issues as just look, these are still kids, really, more than anything else. They're young guys, and they're going to make mistakes, and they're going to do stuff that's dumb. Plus, they've been raised in a situation where they've been essentially allowed to believe they can do no wrong and been allowed to get away with stuff. So why wouldn't they think it's going to continue? When it doesn't, they either learn a lesson or they don't. I think Le'Veon may have. I hope Martavis has. I'm telling you, if you haven't been watching his Instagram account, go do it, because the dude is a beast.
Yeah, he's jacked. He is certainly focused on making a return, and I think his head's on straight. And whatever happened, bygones be bygones. Looks like it's in his past. So, but that did not stop the Steelers from maybe taking out an insurance policy in free agency. So their big moves were David Johnson and Landry Jones. Another big one was a move they didn't make, but this is the last of the ones they have made thus far, and that was signing a former Tennessee Titans wide receiver, and then he had a cup of coffee up in Buffalo for last season, wide receiver Justin Hunter.
Yeah. Eric wrote a really nice piece about him. As I said in some of our internal chats, I might have to do a counterpoint to it, because I'm still not convinced that Justin Hunter makes the roster.
Nor am I. I think he's a body that's there. They're going to try and see what he can add. Everybody's always talking about, and this is doing the whole film thing with that Eagles game. Most people also forget they once again tried to get Antonio Brown off of the special teams, off of being a punt returner, and through 3 games, Eli Rogers was still the punt returner last season. So This could be just another one of those things. But Eli got hurt. He was in a walking boot. Antonio takes the reins again, and then there's always that. There's DeMarcus Ayers getting drafted. Oh, well, Antonio Brown's not going to be doing this. Guess what? And by the end of the season, Antonio Brown's doing this again. And then there's the whole, the kick. I don't even like kick returns in the NFL. I don't think Roger Goodell does, and he wants to get rid of them. I think they're pretty much inconsequential. But people still want to point out, like you were saying about Brady, the one exception to the rule, they want to point out to me, Tyreek Hill. And I'm just like, I'm rolling my eyes. I got the emojis going over on Twitter. So maybe that's where Justin Hunter fits into this whole thing.
Could be.
They're going to give him a look. It's not like they gave this guy this monster deal. It wasn't like he was like this Dante Hightower that was, schmoozing with the Steelers, or Devon House for that matter, who signed a contract with another team while he was still in the Southside complex.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's none of that. I mean, this guy's just, he's getting a chance to extend his career one more season, because like Darius Hayward-Bay, a lot of people looked at that signing and thought, well, that guy's done. I have no idea why they're doing this. Well, here you go. There's another flyer. Let's see if Justin Hunter has anything left in the tank like DHB did.
Yeah, I welcome the guy with open arms to the Steelers. Absolutely. I have nothing but high hopes for him. But who knows? I mean, everybody has been kind of saying he's Martavis. There was a whole Twitter storm about it, and Martavis even had to get in and say, "Look, dudes, really, come on, let's look at the stats and be real," because the stat comparison that somebody threw up on Twitter showed that they were very similar. Of course, Justin Hunter has played for 4 years and about almost 2.5 times as many games as Martavis in order to get the same numbers. So it's not the same. But who knows? As Bob Labriola said today, he basically said the one thing about it is, if he comes here and he does his job and he performs, you never know, because he will be playing with the best quarterback he's ever played with in his career by far.
I have those numbers, by the way. Those came when I first saw them. That was, I hope I don't pronounce his name wrong. Sorry, Tommy, I see your stuff sometimes, so I'm just going to say, Tommy, it's either Yagi or Jaggy, at Tommy Jaggy on Twitter, and he put up this picture, and I had to ask, of which I got a response from someone else. It was Martavis had 76 receptions to Justin Hunter's 78. They each had over 1,300 yards, 1314 to 1305. The Martavis 17.3 averaged to 16.7, so he's averaging about 0.5 yards more per catch. 14 TDs to Hunter's 12, And that like made my eyes bug out a little bit. And I'm like, really? Well, why isn't this guy with some other team? And I'm like, so how many games was that for? And Jimmy Norkowitz, who tweets out a lot of great stuff, talk to Jimmy here on the side every now and then. And Jimmy says it was 21 games for Bryant. And as you alluded to, 48 for Hunter. So huge disparity there.
Yeah. So it's not the same. I mean, it's a signing. It's a typical Steelers free agent signing. It's a guy that maybe has some upside, and if he doesn't, it's not going to hurt them.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I mean, that's what there's the hype train over all kind of things, you know. Josh McCown, you got to go get Josh McCown, that he's released, and you got to go get Brandon Marshall. Yeah, he's released. Got to go bring him here, you know. So we're going to be talking about another one of those guys, but it's like when here, I'm going to put this into perspective, and I wrote about this the other day as well. There's Elliot Harrison from NFL Network does the power rankings for the entire league. And he has the Steelers ranked at third for his free agency. After like 1 week of free agency, the Steelers are still third behind the two Super Bowl teams, the Patriots and the Falcons. How can that be? The Steelers have made no moves. They've made no moves at all. Well, they kept Le'Veon Bell and they kept Antonio Brown. And I've already, that's a broken record with me. It's like if you wouldn't have paid these guys, or they would have been anyone else's free agent that we would have signed away from them and offered them big money here, he probably would have been excited about it. So Steelers standing pat. They're still getting a number of big superstar players back. Potentially, we already talked about Martavis Bryant. Cameron Hayward is going to be back to full health. He's like the captain on this defense. He is the voice of this defense. Who am I missing? Ladarius Green. They expect him to be at full health. And I think I'm missing somebody else somewhere in here, but I drew a blank. But those are three guys at least that.
And those are three big guys too. I mean, those are huge pieces that we're missing last year. And you know, from the defensive side, you throw Cam back into a line that performed much better than anybody anticipated they would over the last half of the season, and now you add a guy who is certainly nothing but a nonstop motor-driven leader on that team, and you've got definite upside there. Then you add in Martavis and you add in Ladarius. Now you've got two deep threats that weren't there before. You've got Martavis, who is without a doubt a legitimate number two and has the potential, if this workout regimen he's been going through pays off, to really push Antonio for being targeted, because the guy could be a monster. And it's just amazing. It's fantastic that we have him for 2 more years. And all, as you said, all will be forgiven the first time he goes in for 6.
Oh, yeah. He'll be forgiven as soon as he does it in the preseason. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
And it'll be Landry Jones throwing him the ball, and everybody will be praising how Bryant was the one responsible for it. Not to mention the guy who puts it on the money. So, yeah, Simon, that's that Landry bias, baby. But Mr. Preseason. Anyways, but the Steelers did have a little bit of inaction, and a lot of people, again, the sky is falling because they let Jarvis Jones go sign with Steelers West out there in Arizona. No, that's not the guy. That's not the guy. We know who we're talking about. You had the sad faces too. We're sad to see Lawrence Timmons go as well, but hey, Vince Williams might be ready to step right into that spot, or they may even draft a guy. Who knows?
I think that they'll do a couple things. I mean, I love Vince Williams. I think Vince Williams is just a ball of energy, and man, does he hit. He hits hard. The question that we have, and I know Nate did a really good job with that film room study on Vince, and he could only really find a very limited coverage history because he hasn't played that much. And that's the one question you have. How is he in coverage? Because Lawrence, Law Dog was awesome, and I am sad to see Law Dog move on. I would have loved to have him retire a Steeler. I think once he is done, he will probably come back and retire as a Steeler, even if it's just to sign a one-day contract. The guy has been nothing but consistent and solid, but you cannot give him $11 million guaranteed or whatever ridiculous amount of money Miami guaranteed him, and the Steelers were never going to do that because he's an older player at this point, and you just don't know. But I think, with Vince, you got a shot at having a guy who certainly can take on the role that Lawrence had at the will position for run support and attacking the quarterback position. And maybe he can cover. Maybe.
Yeah.
We don't know yet.
No, we don't. And that's kind of one of the things this was one of the sticking points with signing Timmons last year was they didn't know whether or not he was a 3-down back. It was a lot of Steelers playing a lot of nickel, maybe taking one of those guys off the field, usually leaving Shazier out there. And you know what? Timmons, just north of 30, he probably has a few years left in him. But you know what else? The Steelers are looking at all these other guys they're going to have to start giving money to. They're eventually going to rework and do a long-term deal with Bell. They're probably going to do something very similar with Alejandro Villanueva because left tackles just don't grow on trees. And they could have him on the cheap for 2 years, but I have a feeling the Steelers, being a class organization, are going to say, hey, you know what? They're going to spread this money out so they could get him a lot longer than that and do something that ends up working out great for the team as they have the money to spend. At the same time, they're getting younger and cheaper at that position with Vince Williams taking over for Lawrence Timmons. This is probably one of the other reasons why they told Hightower, if you get on the plane, the deal's yanked. And Hightower was trying to use it for leverage. I can't blame him. This is what they do. This is exactly what I thought Timmons was going to Miami to do. I didn't think he was going to immediately sign, but I guess he already knew what was on the table from last year's negotiations with the Steelers, so at least had a gut feeling that could have been the case.
Yeah, I think the money was not that far off as a total package. I mean, it was really, really close. The difference was the guaranteed money, and he knew the Steelers were not going to guarantee that much money to him.
Yeah, so there's one other person that comes up now, Aditi Kikwala. I'm not sure if you heard this. You're giggling. I think you did hear it. The same that I heard. I heard the whole thing, man. And there's somebody that's getting paid $6 million by the New York Jets this season, but is not a member of the New York Jets any longer. He's a Pittsburgh native. He made headlines for the whole people were putting cell phones and stuff in his face not too long ago right in the city. Yep. And he used to be... He was such a great press cover type guy that they used to say they had an island named after him. That would be Revis Island, Darrell Revis. People are thinking, people are asking, people want to know, is there still, if you listen to him talk with Aditi, he says his passion still, it sounds all good, man. It sounds like he's been working out. He's changed his diet. He's convinced me that he still has enough left in the tank and he's ready. And I don't have the quote in front of me, but he said something like, I would play for the minimum. I would like to play for the Steelers. He's like, we need to talk and see what can be worked out. And I'm like, I have no idea if this is, I think I trashed the idea not too long ago, but.
Well, remember, we've had this ever since he was released. We had internal conversations about Darrell Revis, and we all pretty much said the same thing. A league minimum deal, why wouldn't you bring him in? Even if it's just as a guy who can help mentor the young guys that we have. But nobody thought that he was going to do a league min deal. And, you forget, and I know that I saw several different parts of this tweeted out. One guy thought, okay, he's getting $6 million to do nothing, but he won't get that money. But he will get that money. It doesn't matter whether he plays someplace else. He's going to get that money. So it isn't that he has to make a certain amount. He can make nothing, essentially, which is why he might be willing to play for league minimum. And he's still going to make $6 million a year, at least. I don't know what the league minimum is off the top of my head for somebody with his tenure. But assume it's $1 million a year. Well, that means he's going to get $7 million. And that's $7 million is not a bad number for him, even if we don't have to pay except for one. And I do think we have to be realistic. The guy had to be looking at that team last year in New York and going, why am I even bothering? It was a mess.
That's putting it lightly. They were a dumpster fire. Their secondary was awful. Calvin Pryor, Buster Screen. How can you have an island when there's nothing working for you at all? It was just really pathetic. They even got called out by some of the commentary and broadcast and radio guys and everything, and just having no heart left. And that, so that affects everyone. It's hard to play when other guys on your side of the ball, you're just not playing as a team. And I think if Rivas were to go sign somewhere, obviously the Steelers are someone that's really linked. We all know that Mike Tomlin and them have looked into as signing him before. Where's he going to go play? He's not going to go play for another New York Jets team, any type of team that's not in it to win it. He's going to play for a contender. You're going to be looking at the Steelers. I hate to say it again, but you never know. He played for the Patriots. We don't know how that was left off.
They've got no room for him now. Not after signing Gilmore.
Not after signing Rex Burkhead.
Well, yeah. That was a key one there. I mean, he's actually, who knows? That's the typical Patriots move. Let's sign a white guy.
I just wanted to bring that up. And I think even Ian Rappaport tweeted out something like it's the most Patriotsy thing to do, like something like that. And it's just. I'm just saying on a league minimum type thing, they might be able to do something with that, but he's got to be going to Pittsburgh, Dallas Cowboys, another team I think. There might be a couple more. So Packers were looking into corners, but House he signed while he was in our house, so maybe they got their guy already. But
yep.
I don't know. Rivas says a lot of his same training and movements and stuff, like he could play safety and things of that nature too. And I'm just wondering where the thing that seems to be the knock now is that it's no longer an island. And if it's no longer an island, that means he's not a man cover guy, which is what we were all criticizing the Steelers for doing. But then again, the Steelers play zone, and let's say they're not trying to change anything up and have somebody press and blah, blah, blah. The system might actually benefit a guy like Darrelle Revis.
Yeah.
In the latter half of it, he's in the twilight of his career. Might not be a bad move. The system might actually work for him. Then you'll actually see maybe zone coverage isn't so awful, or maybe we'll just be wrong and they target him 17 times like the Cleveland Browns did last season. So you never know. It's glass half empty, glass half full. Like you said, if it's not going to cost you anything, it's not going to cost you anything. So
yeah, why not bring him in and see? Who knows if the guy was out of shape last year, if he didn't take his training seriously, if he really just let himself go. And didn't have his heart in it, and he believes that's not the way he wants to leave his legacy. That's not how he wants to exit the league, and he wants to come back and prove it. Well, the guy has pride. Maybe he will stick him in there for training camp and see what he's got. If he hasn't got anything, guess what? It ain't going to cost you nothing to cut him.
Yeah, and you know what? And that's where I want to clarify where I was originally trashing Rivas. It's like how you said you're not a Landry lover and you're not a Landry hater. I was looking at it purely for financials. I'm like, I would not want to pay him $6, $7, $8 million, not knowing what kind of player he is now. But if you could take a flyer on him, this is like signing Justin Hunter.
It is. It's exactly the same move. An older Justin Hunter, but it's the same kind of move. Look, we've got Artie locked up, in his rookie contract for a while, and Artie has the ability to play press. Why not bring Rivas in and let the old salt veteran give him some tips? You've got Ross Cockrell, who may or may not sign his tender, but he hasn't seemed like. I've seen conflicting reports about Ross, whether there's a bunch of teams interested or nobody has even talked to him. But he's clearly not on the top of anybody's list except maybe ours. And I think he'll probably be back. And then if they draft a corner in the draft, well, I think they're in good shape. And let's not forget Senquez coming in as well. So I don't see the downside really to bringing the guy in and seeing if he's got any gas left in the tank. I mean, this was an all-pro caliber player at one point.
Yeah, which Justin Hunter was not. So there's definitely even more upside to, hey, you know what? If Reeves, and you never know if he likes it here or it's a prove it deal. They brought in, like, I keep going back to this because they kept doing certain things. I mean, they brought in D'Angelo Williams. I mean, it's a very similar type of situation. It doesn't hurt the team. It doesn't hurt the player. So this might be worth checking out. So that's more or less. I would hate it if they were going to throw him a lot of money. I was also going to hate. I mentioned before. I was like, we could be looking at Dante Hightower in replacement of Lawrence Timmons, but I wouldn't want to give him the moon. I don't want him swimming in his Scrooge McDuck palace vault with all the change and loose coins and that he'd have so much money from the Steelers, because I'm trying to remember who really hated that, if it was Bouchette or Jim Wexell or maybe both.
It could have been both, but Bouchette
really
wrote an article about how he did him a favor by not signing.
Yeah, and that's pretty harsh, but it would have been, it may have been a downgrade for a lot of money. You never know. It may have been an upgrade, but you know what? Once again, the Steelers standing pat, doing as they do, treading lightly. They don't have to do much. They have got everything assembled from what we told you. And you know what? If they add a guy like Rivas, it's just going to make drafting the best player available just even easier.
That much easier. You said standing pat. It reminds me of something that somebody wrote. I don't remember who that guy was. Oh, wait, it was me. I wrote an article about that. Yeah, sometimes doing nothing is the best thing you can do. And for the Steelers especially, I just think that Bouchette may be very well right. The fact that I don't think Hightower was ever serious about coming here, I think is a blessing in disguise.
Absolutely. So, Brian, good having you on again, buddy. My regular.
Absolutely.
My goose.
Yes,
you're my Mav. With that.
I'm your goose.
So, buddy, we're going to be talking draft stuff coming up, but we'll hold that for another show, and I'm going to come back around and talk about some of these AFC North teams and see what they do. Until next time, folks, be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.